The year was 1865, and the frontier was burning, not from fire, but from the greed of men. The air above Rio Blanco shimmered with the smoke of a dozen campfires and the iron tang of gun oil. Dusk pressed its bruised light against the horizon as the last freight wagon creaked into town. Elias Carter rode behind it, hat low, the brim shadowing eyes hardened by too many winters and too much guilt. His horse moved slow, careful through the mud. He had been gone 3 years, and every hoofbeat felt like trespass. The town had changed. The saloon leaned heavier on one side, the church bell hung cracked, and the trading post looked more like a fortress than a store. Men with rifles stood outside, eyes flicking to the ridges as if expecting ghosts. Elias tethered his horse, pushed open the door, and stepped into the kind of silence that follows bad news. Inside, the smell of whiskey and fear was thick enough to taste. A piano sat broken in the corner, one key forever jammed in place. 3 miners hunched over their glasses, and a lawman with a star pinned to his vest watched Elias like a man measuring distance to his gun. Elias ignored him and went to the bar. "Whiskey," he said. The barkeep poured it slow, studying the scar that ran from Elias's jaw to his throat. "You from around here?" "Used to be." "That's so." The man wiped his hands on a rag, leaning forward. "Then you heard about the Vance place." Elias's hand paused halfway to the glass. "What about it?" "Burned last night. Word is Cheyenne torched it. They say Miss Clara barely made it out. Her brother didn't. The whiskey went untouched. The room seemed to tilt." Elias remembered a woman standing on a porch, sunlight in her hair, voice low with warning. "If you ride away now, don't ever come back." He'd left anyway, left for money, for pride, for nothing that ever lasted. And now, the only good thing he'd known might already be ash. Outside, the wind shifted. Somewhere a dog barked and then went silent. Elias turned, his voice calm but his pulse hammering. "Where is she?" The barkeep nodded toward the stables. "Heard she's tending to what's left of the horses. Sheriff's men are looking to question her soon." Elias left a coin on the counter and pushed through the door. The streets were empty except for drifting dust and the glow of lanterns. He moved quick, boots whispering over dirt. The smell hit him first, smoke and sweat, and then he saw her. Clara Vance knelt beside a wounded mare, her dress torn, her hands shaking. She looked up when he called her name, disbelief washing over her face. "Elias!" He stopped a few feet away, the words caught in his throat. "I came back when I heard." "You heard?" Her voice cracked like dry wood. "You always come when it's too late." Before he could answer, the sound of gunfire tore through the night. 1 shot, then 3. The town erupted in shouts. Flames licked up from behind the general store, spilling light across the sky. Elias dropped to one knee beside her. "Can you run?" She shook her head, gripping her thigh where blood seeped through the fabric. "They hit me when I ran from the barn." More gunshots, then the whinny of horses breaking loose. Men's voices rough and angry. Elias drew his revolver and scanned the shadows. He saw movement, a figure carrying a torch, another raising a rifle. "Stay low," he said. He fired once, twice, and both shapes fell. The torch tumbled into the river mud, hissing out in a puff of smoke. He turned back, grabbed Clara by the arm. "We have to move." She winced but nodded. Together they stumbled toward the water's edge. The heat from the flames rolled over them in waves, turning the night to blood-red daylight. Elias could taste ash on his tongue. He half-dragged, half-carried her into the shallows, the cold river biting at his boots. Behind them, the town was a roar of chaos, men shouting orders, gunfire cutting through the screams. He knew the pattern, he'd seen it before. This wasn't the Cheyenne. This was hired destruction, land grabbers clearing the last holdouts before the railroad came through. And the Vance land was worth more than all the others combined. They crouched in the reeds, breath ragged. Clara pressed her palm to the wound, trembling. "You shouldn't have come back, Elias. They'll kill you too." "Let them try," he said. "I made you a promise once. You broke it." He didn't argue. The truth was written all over his face. Instead, he tore a strip from his shirt, wrapped it tight around her leg, and whispered, "I don't plan on breaking it twice." The fire's reflection danced across her eyes as she stared at him. Anger, sorrow, something softer beneath. "You can't save what's already burned." "Maybe not," he said, loading another round into his revolver. "But I can damn well keep it from spreading." A sudden rustle came from the opposite bank. Elias froze. 3 silhouettes appeared against the flames, tall and armed, torches burning bright in their fists. He recognized the stance of one, the sheriff, Tate, the same man who once called Elias a brother. "Carter." Tate's voice cut through the wind. "You've got something that don't belong to you. Send her out, and maybe I let you walk." Elias rose halfway, keeping Clara behind him. "She's not yours to take." "Everything west of the Blanco is mine now," Tate said. "You should have stayed gone." Elias's hand tightened on the revolver. "You lit this fire?" Tate grinned through the smoke. "Just finishing what we started? Progress costs." "Yeah," Elias said. "So does conscience." He fired first. The bullet struck Tate's torch, sending flames spilling into the grass. Chaos erupted again. Clara crawled to cover as Elias traded shots, the world exploding in sound and light. Bullets tore through the reeds. Sparks flew where lead met stone. One of Tate's men went down screaming. Another lunged forward, only to meet Elias's blade, quick and silent. Then the sharp crack of a rifle. Pain ripped through Elias's shoulder, spinning him back into the mud. Clara screamed his name, crawled to him, grabbed his arm. "Elias, we have to go." Through the haze, he saw Tate retreating, shouting orders, the fire behind him climbing higher, devouring everything in its path. The river glowed orange beneath the moon. Elias forced himself up, gritting his teeth against the pain. He helped Clara to her feet. Together they stumbled along the bank, away from a burning town. The night swallowed them whole. Behind, the inferno roared louder than any sermon. They didn't speak until the sound of pursuit faded into the wind. Clara's breath came in shallow bursts. "Where will we go?" Elias looked to the dark hills beyond the river. "North. There's a ridge where they won't track us." She hesitated, eyes glistening with both tears and firelight. "And after?" He met her gaze, his voice low, steady. "After, we start over. If we can." She didn't answer. Instead, she looked back toward the burning town, lips trembling as if whispering goodbye. The heat shimmered in the distance like a ghost refusing to fade. Elias followed her eyes. He thought of the years wasted, the choices that brought him here, the weight of every broken word. Tonight, he had no redemption, only the beginning of one. The moon slid behind a cloud. The wind carried ash like snow. Somewhere far off, a wolf howled, and Elias turned toward the sound, his arms still around her, his promise burning hotter than the town they'd left behind. When the flames rose behind them, his promise rose too. Dawn broke pale and smoky over the wilderness. The river ran sluggish and brown, carrying ash from the town they'd fled. Elias sat on a flat stone near the bank, shirt stripped to bind his shoulder, his revolver lying open beside him. The morning was too still. Even the birds kept quiet. Behind him, Clara stirred in her sleep, her face half lit by the dying embers of their small fire. He watched her for a moment, her hand clutching the edge of her skirt, the same stubborn strength he remembered still burning in her eyes, even in rest. She woke suddenly, gasping as pain pulled her back to the world. "How far did we make it?" she asked, voice rough. "Far enough to lose them," Elias said. "Not far enough to be safe." She pushed herself upright, wincing as her leg brushed against the rough bandage he'd tied the night before. "You always had a way of finding trouble." He smiled faintly. "I was born to it." The silence that followed was heavy, but not cruel. The land around them was vast and empty, miles of pine and yellow grass stretching to the edge of sight. Smoke hung low, ghosting between the trees. Clara looked toward it, her expression tightening. "My brother's still back there." Elias lowered his eyes. "I know. You didn't even go look." "There wasn't time," he said quietly. "You were bleeding. If we'd stayed, we'd both be dead." Her breath caught, anger and grief colliding. "So, you saved me and let him burn? Is that it?" He met her gaze and didn't flinch. "I saved who I could." She looked away, tears catching the light. "You always pick the easy road, Elias." He stood and began packing the few supplies they had: water skin, dried meat, his knife. "The easy road doesn't usually start with gunfire." The edge in his tones silenced her, but only for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice had softened. "What happened to you after you left?" He hesitated. "I worked the border for a while, hired gun for the railmen. Thought I could buy some kind of peace." "And did you?" "No," his jaw tightened. "Turns out peace doesn't like to be bought." Clara's eyes searched his face, finding the wear and regret carved deep there. "You helped them, didn't you?" she said quietly. "The men who came for our land." He didn't answer, but the silence was enough. Her expression hardened. "They promised it'd be quick," he said finally. "No one would get hurt. I believe them. Stupid thing to do." She turned away, staring out toward the ridges. "My father died fighting them, and you were one of them." "I wasn't then what I am now." "And what are you now?" she asked. He thought about it a moment. A man trying to make a different mistake. For a long while neither spoke. The wind shifted through the reeds, whispering like the dead. Then Clara sighed and stood with effort. "If we're going north, we should move before the sun climbs." He nodded. They followed the river through narrow valleys, their footsteps muffled by wet grass. The wilderness swallowed them whole, the world shrinking to the sound of boots and water and the rasp of Elias's breath. Every few miles they stopped to rest, her leg bleeding anew, his shoulder stiff with pain. By midday, they reached a stretch of flat land dotted with willow trees. Elias knelt, studying fresh tracks in the mud, horses, 3 of them heavy-booted riders. He recognized the imprint of a spur shaped like a star. "They're hunting us," he said. Clara's face paled. "Who?" "Men I used to ride with." He straightened, his voice low. "Tate send them." "Then we keep moving," she said. They pressed on, cutting through the brush until the sound of the river faded. The heat rose, drawing sweat and fatigue from them both. The land felt endless. Just when Clara's limp became too much to hide, Elias raised a hand. "Wait." Ahead, through the shimmer of the afternoon light, 3 riders emerged on the ridge. Dust lifted behind them like smoke. "Down," Elias whispered. They ducked into a hollow framed by rocks. The riders drew closer, one laughing, the others scanning the trees. Elias loaded his revolver, thumb brushing the worn handle. Clara's breath trembled beside him. When the first rider came within 20 yards, Elias fired. The man fell instantly. The others wheeled their horses, shouting. Bullets sparked off the stones. Elias fired again, missed, then rolled aside as a shot tore through the ground where he'd been. Clara grabbed the fallen rifle and aimed, hands shaking. "I can't." "You can," Elias said sharply. "Now." The shot rang true. One horse screamed and reared. Its rider tumbled into the brush. The third man spurred his horse toward them. Elias rose, fired point-blank. The sound echoed like thunder across the valley. Silence followed. Elias stood breathing hard, the gun still smoking in his hand. Clara lowered the rifle slowly, her whole body trembling. "I've never shot a man before." He looked at her. "You did what you had to." Her eyes were wide, pupils dark with something like horror. "That's what they always said, isn't it? You did what you had to." He wanted to answer, but there was no right way. The truth stung too much. They gathered what they could from the dead, water, ammunition, a blanket, and buried them quickly under loose earth. When they were done, Clara sat beside the mound, hands dirty, face blank. "Were they your friends?" "Once," Elias said. "Before I learned what friendship costs out here." The wind carried the scent of pine and gunpowder. Distant thunder rolled from the mountains. Elias watched her wrap her wounded leg again, her hand steady now. She'd hardened in a single day, and the sight filled him with both pride and sorrow. As night fell, they found shelter in the ruins of an old cabin near the river. The roof had caved in, but a stone fireplace still stood. Elias lit a small fire, and the light flickered over their faces. Clara sat close, staring into the flames. "When you left," she said softly, "I hated you for years. I thought you'd become one of them because it was easy. But now I see it wasn't easy, it was empty." Elias stared into the fire, too. Emptiness has a way of sounding quiet. You don't hear it until it's too late. She turned to him. "Why come back now?" "Because I heard your name," he said, "and because the fire didn't finish what it started." The crackle of burning would fill the silence that followed. Outside, rain began to fall in slow, heavy drops hissing against the coals. Clara reached for the blanket, pulled it around her shoulders. Her eyes softened, though her voice stayed firm. "You can't atone for everything, Elias." "I know," he said, "but I can try to stand between the past and whatever's left of the future." A faint smile ghosted across her face. "You talk like a preacher." "Preachers don't carry six-shooters." "Maybe they should." They shared a brief, fragile laugh that vanished almost as soon as it came. The rain grew heavier. Elias added another log to the fire and sat back, feeling the ache in his wounds. When he looked at her again, her eyes were closed, her breathing even. He watched her sleep, the firelight catching in her hair. In her face, he saw the promise he'd broken and the one he might still keep. Outside, thunder rolled closer, echoing through the canyons. Elias stared into the flames until they blurred, thinking of the men who would come next, of Tate and the reckoning waiting on the horizon. He whispered to the night, almost a prayer, "Tomorrow we finish this." Morning came slow and gray, the kind of light that seemed to carry the taste of iron. The rain had passed, leaving the land slick and steaming, every leaf glinting with moisture. Elias woke first. His shoulder throbbed, his back stiff, but it wasn't pain that stirred him. It was the sound of hooves, distant yet certain. He rose quietly, scanning the horizon through the cabin's collapsed wall. 3 riders moved along the far ridge, dark shapes against the pale sky. Tate's men again, or worse. He turned to Clara. She was already awake, watching him with eyes that held no fear, only resolve. "They've found us," she said. He nodded. "Then it's time to stop running." Clara pushed herself up, wrapping the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "You'll be killed if you face them alone." Elias holstered his revolver, checked the rounds, and met her gaze. "Maybe, but if I don't, they'll burn every home left standing. Tate won't stop until this land's his." She stepped closer, her voice low. "You can't fight fire with fire." He smiled faintly. "No, but sometimes you can choke it out with ash." They left the cabin, just as the first shaft of sun cut through the clouds. The land stretched before them. Wet grass, blackened trees, and the faint curl of smoke rising from the north. The smell of char and salt rode the wind. Elias knew what it meant. The homestead beyond the ridge was already burning. By midday, they reached it. A dozen settlers huddled behind overturned wagons, smoke swirling around them. Elias saw familiar faces, farmers, ranch hands, women clutching children. Fear had stripped them to silence. A man with a broken arm stepped forward. "Carter," he said, voice trembling. "Tate's men, they came before dawn. Said this land belongs to the company now." Elias scanned the burning fields. "Where is he?" "Old Quarry," the man said. "He's holed up there with his men, waiting to finish what's left." Elias turned to Clara. "Stay here. Keep them safe." She caught his arm. "You think I'll just wait for you to die?" "I need you alive," he said. "That's the only promise worth keeping." Her eyes glistened, but she let him go. The path to the quarry wound through ravines slick with mud. Elias rode a borrowed horse, the reins slick in his hand. Every hoofbeat echoed like a heartbeat against stone. He saw vultures circling above the cliffs, black against the sun. The closer he came, the clearer the sound of laughter grew. Men drinking, boasting, unaware of what was coming. He dismounted at the edge of the quarry and walked the rest of the way, revolver drawn. Below, Tate stood beside a wagon stacked with crates of dynamite, barking orders. His badge gleamed on his chest, a symbol more rust than honor. "Tate!" Elias's voice cracked across the rocks. Every head turned. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Tate grinned. Well, I'll be damned. Thought you'd drown by now. Elias stepped forward, boots grinding the gravel. You burned a town, killed a boy, and called it justice. Justice? Tate laughed, gesturing wide. This is business, Carter. Railroads don't build themselves. You of all people should understand that. I understand blood's a poor foundation. Tate's smile faded. You always were sentimental. That's why you'll die poor. He drew first, quick as a rattlesnake. Elias moved faster. The first shot tore through Tate's hat. The second caught one of his men square in the chest. Then the quarry erupted, bullets sparking off stone, men shouting, horses screaming. Elias dropped behind a boulder, reloading with shaking hands. Dust and smoke choked the air. He counted 3 left. One climbed the ridge, another circled wide. Tate's voice carried over the din. You can't stop it, Carter. The deed's signed, the land's gone. All you're doing is dying loud. Elias rose, fired twice. One man fell. The second charged, rifle raised. They collided in a blur of fists and gunmetal. The rifle went off wild, the sound deafening. Elias slammed the man's head into the stone. Once, twice, until the body went limp. He turned, bleeding from a cut along his cheek, and saw Tate standing by the dynamite wagon, a torch in hand. Back away, Tate called. You think you can play hero? I'll bury this whole valley if I have to. Elias's breath came ragged. You light that fuse, there's no going back. Tate's grin returned. Ain't no going back for men like us anyway. The torch touched the fuse. Sparks hissed to life. Elias fired. The bullet struck Tate in the chest, but the man stayed standing long enough to smile one last time. Too late, he whispered. Elias lunged, grabbed the burning fuse, ripped it free. The sparks bit into his hand, searing skin. He hurled it into the mud, just as the last ember died. Tate fell to his knees, coughing blood. You still think it was worth it? Elias asked. Tate looked up, eyes clouded. Progress always is. Then he toppled backward, lifeless. Elias stood over him, breathing hard. Around him, the quarry was silent except for the drip of water from the rocks. He holstered his gun, the weight of it suddenly unbearable. The wind rose, carrying the smell of sulfur and blood. When he turned, Clara was there, limping down the slope. You're hurt, she said. I've been worse. She looked past him to Tate's body, then back at Elias. It's done then? He shook his head. Not yet. Together, they pried open one of the crates on the wagon. Inside lay papers, land deeds, company maps, contracts signed in blood and ink. Clara's hands trembled as she held them. All of it, she whispered. He stole everything. Elias took the papers, fed them into the dying torch flame. The parchment curled, blackened, turned to ash. Not anymore. They rode back at dusk. The settlers stood, waiting at the homestead ruins, faces hollow but hopeful. When they saw Elias and Clara return, some cried, some prayed. Elias handed the last of Tate's weapons to the men, his voice steady. The land's yours again. Defend it. Build something worth the fight. A murmur of thanks rose, low and broken. Elias caught Clara watching him, her expression unreadable. As the sun sank, they sat together by the river, the same one they'd escaped through nights ago. The water glowed red and gold, reflecting the dying light. Clara spoke softly. You could stay. Help them rebuild. He shook his head. A man like me brings more ghosts than walls. She touched his bandaged shoulder. You brought back hope. He smiled faintly. Hope's fragile. Better it stays with you. For a long moment they said nothing. The sky turned violet, the first stars trembling above the horizon. Elias rose, adjusted his hat, and looked north where the hills cut sharp against the dusk. So this is goodbye, she asked. For now, he said. There's more fire out there to put out. Clara nodded, eyes shining. Then promise me one thing, don't let it take you two. He tipped his hat. When the flames rise, so will the promise. He walked into the fading light, the sound of the river behind him like a heartbeat. Later, when the night came full and the stars burned bright, Clara stood alone at the water's edge. The wind carried his words back to her, faint as prayer. She closed her eyes and whispered them to the dark. When the flames rose, so did his promise, and somewhere beyond the hills, a lone rider vanished into the dawn.